Welcome to the Sooners 360 Recruiting Podcast, a podcast for OU recruiting fans by Sooners 360. Each week we catch you up on the latest in OU recruiting news and provide opinions and evaluations on all things OU football recruiting. I'm Chris Mason, lead recruiting analyst for Sooners 360. This podcast is now sponsored by Sooners 360 on Patreon. To support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/Sooners360817 and click subscribe. It's only $2 a month. And there's also a free trial option, and that's where I'm posting all of my regular recruiting content. The link will also be in the show notes. Finally, this podcast is part of the Believe podcast family. Every team, every topic, everywhere. I'm also appearing on the Hordes Down podcast YouTube channel discussing OU's season and off-season, along with Chris with the K and Jason Watkins from the Hall of Fame podcast. Please like and subscribe to that YouTube channel as well, and you can catch me there. Usually every Wednesday, we're trying to do a podcast covering all things OU. So we'll jump right into it. This is episode 120, running back commitments and Elite 11 news. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the recruiting news. So first off, we always start with commit news, and the commit news is commitments coming up rather than actual commitments. So the first one is, just to recap, is we had an update last week around Future Freaks from Caden Jones announcing an end of March decision. Now, on the podcast, last week, I initially thought that was good news for OU, that Caden Jones, being Kawan Jones, the OU legacy, who's been in Norman any number of times, that this was trending towards OU. Never really heard anything different. Well, a number of recruiting services, principally Colin Kennedy over at OU 247, and the Rivals OU guys, OU Insider, on some of their social media traffic and podcasts, have indicated that maybe this is a little more up in the air than we had thought, that maybe Kansas is leading right now, that maybe Oklahoma State's going to get involved, or maybe that Louisville could win this. Louisville just got a running back commit, I believe, for 2026. So he may not be quite as Louisville may not be quite as attractive a location for him. Yeah, they got a 3-star running back named Evan Hampton, local kid, local Kentucky kid. So may not impact their want or desire to get Caden Jones, but OU is going to have to play catch up if they want to, or may decide to let Caden Jones go to Oklahoma State or to Kansas. It's going to be an interesting recruiting to watch, to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But if you're reading between the lines, it might seem that OU has perhaps changed their focus in their sort of speed back target for this class to the Baylor commit, Rylan Morris, who we've talked about before. He's about 5'10", 180 pounds, excellent receiver out of the backfield, quick, got home run speed. I know you've obviously paid him a lot of attention early on. He was at the January recruiting, big weekend they had at the end of January. So it's going to be interesting to see which way this goes. Because he's an interesting player. He's a good athlete. Let's see where 247 has him ranked. I think they have him as an athlete, not as a running back. Yep. So it's Rylan Morris from Honeygrove, Texas. He's listed about 5'9", 5'10", 170 pounds. Composite top 200 player in the nation. So that could be one of the reasons why OU might move on from Caden Jones. The other running back recruit, hence the name in the title, that has announced his commitment is Jonathan Hatton. He says he's announcing on 3/22. Now, obviously, Jonathan Hatton was committed to OU for a while. At the end of their, not so great season, he decommitted. Everyone said he was going to choose A&M and that A&M had made a huge push. He's obviously from the San Antonio area, giving A&M kind of a local advantage. Everything was pointing towards him committing to A&M, and then he didn't. And then OU got Arbuckle hired and got their offensive recruiting going again. And it seemed like they were re-engaging with Hatton. Hatton announced a number of official visits. Just OU, I think Ohio State and Texas A&M. So it looked like he was just going to do that. But he said he was going to wait until he took his official visits because he felt like he verbaled too early. Then he went to the Future Freaks event in March. A lot of positivity from OU coming out of that. And then he announced that he was going to make, he's going to make a commitment. So in old school recruiting, that tip-off would tell me that OU had maybe reestablished a lead or taken a lead back, and Jonathan, who was committed to OU once, decided it was time to commit again to OU. But we have a number of different recruiting guys indicating A&M is maybe the location. That's what Steve Wiltfong said. And then we have one of the Rivals 100, Rivals National guys. Had A&M picked, then once Jonathan announced a new commitment date, flipped to OU. Now it's flipped back to A&M in like this period of 72 hours. So I don't know quite what to make of this. Maybe A&M has thrown a huge NIL package in, or maybe he was going to choose A&M all along. So we're 5 days away from the verbal commitment. So there is chance for both this story to change any number of directions in any number of ways. So all I know is that the last campus I know that Jonathan Hatton was at, and he could have been at A&M last weekend, I don't have any data saying that, he was at OU and at a big OU event. And my sources say he's clicked. He always has liked DeMarco. DeMarco being, staying with OU, not leaving. I think A&M kind of was telling Hatton that OU's offense was going to be an air raid offense, throwing the ball 60 times a game, and that DeMarco was leaving. I think those are sort of the forces they use. Well, DeMarco's obviously stayed. He seems to be clicking with Arbuckle, according to everything we're hearing. And Arbuckle, seems serious about running the football. So Jonathan Hatton's announcing somewhere on 3/22. I would say it's down to OU and A&M. And this one could go really either way. I think Ohio State is probably a long shot at this point. So is Tennessee. He's also mentioned Alabama at some point, but Alabama's involved with a bunch of other 2026 top running backs. Doesn't seem to quite make sense. Now, Hatton is the big power back that you think would complement the third down back, Morris, so that if OU wanted to take two running backs this year, you'd have you have two guys with unique skill sets to use in complementary ways in Arbuckle's offense. So OU only took one running back last year. Probably, has a very, there's a lot of there's three upperclassmen running backs in the OU room right now. Depending upon, obviously, spring will probably change. After spring, that'll probably change. So two running backs in this class kind of makes sense, but we'll see how things shake out. I was a little more confident of saying OU was probably going to get Hatton about 4 hours ago. So that's always the debate on this podcast. When do you wait and put a line in the sand about what you're about to say for people for the next 4 days? But that seems to be where it's gone. I would say Hatton is going to choose A&M or A&M or OU, and it may go back and forth a couple of times over the next couple of days. Because if OU's really targeted Hatton as their guy at running back, then I could see OU making sure NIL is not try and reduce the NIL gap as much as possible and push their relationships with Hatton and the length of those relationships in particular. So in QB recruiting news, we've got a couple of different Elite 11 updates. for the two guys that it's coming down to. So Bo Bentley, I thought, was going to the Austin Elite 11 Regional, and he would have competed with now Jaden O'Neill, who's left the LA one. For those not on my Patreon, that information's been on my Patreon site for the week. That Jaden O'Neill is no longer going to do the LA Elite 11 Regional. Now that he's moved to Mustang, he's going to do the Austin one. And that I'd anticipated that would be where Bo Bentley would be. Kezian Henderson, the 5-star quarterback from Houston, who was a big-time star in the Navy All-American game in January. So it appears Bo Bentley is going to Florida to do the Florida Elite 11 Regional. I don't know why he's changed that. I can only guess that maybe he's taking some visits to Florida, to Florida, and those visits make it more convenient to do the Florida Elite 11 Regional, where he would be competing with players like Deron Campbell. Maybe I'm not sure if Jared Curtis would be at that Elite 11 or if he would be at a different one. Noah Grubbs, the Notre Dame quarterback, is very likely to be there. Sorry, it's Deron Coleman, who is interested at OU at one point, and he's verbal to Miami. He's a 3-star, but he's played really well in Elite 11 so far. So I'm not sure where the other Elite 11 is. It's probably in Atlanta, and that's probably where Jared Curtis and Faison Brandon will probably compete. So I think he'd be competing against, at a minimum, Deron Coleman and Noah Grubbs. So we'd have an idea of where Bo Bentley is going against two quarterbacks that are ranked essentially in the same range as his same range from that perspective. But Diabell, the top 20 quarterback in the country, ranked to the top 20. He's number 22 composite on 247. So he's close to 5-star. Will probably end up being a 5-star quarterback. Kezian Henderson, who I've been talking about before, is the number 5 player in the nation, number 2 quarterback on 247. Diabell is the top 5. So Jaden O'Neill will at least get to compete now with 2 5-star quarterbacks at the Elite 11 Regional. I'm relatively sure that they only pick 2 or 3 quarterbacks at those events. So if somebody else elite shows up, that'll make it very interesting. But at the very least, while OU pursues this 2 quarterback route, at least for now, that seems just a little weird to me. We're not going to get an O'Neill Bentley head-to-head competition in Elite 11. We're not going to get any data from folks that are there who watch both kids play and can provide us with some opinions on how the kids look. It's not going to happen. But if O'Neill is able to win an MVP at the Austin Elite 11, say, that will be him beating out 2 5-star quarterbacks. So still an interesting metric, still an interesting part of QB recruiting as things continue to go this way. Moving on to 2027, Peyton Houston did visit. I mentioned that in the podcast last week. Getting some more reports on that from some sources. OU really hit that visit out of the park, did a great job reestablishing themselves with Peyton Houston. I think depending upon who you talk to, OU might have grabbed the lead for Peyton Houston, be back in the lead. I don't think a verbal is going to happen anytime soon. Would not shock me if Peyton Houston is not back in Norman for summer camp to throw for Arbuckle and have Arbuckle work him out. And then perhaps you'd see Houston decide that. Obviously, LSU is focused on Elijah Haven, the 2027 quarterback from Louisiana as well. He's a big kid. he's borderline number one in the nation for 2027. Rivals has Peyton Houston just right below that. They have him. The Rivals thinks he's a 5-star quarterback. Some of the other services, just have him ranked significantly lower. So there's different opinions, but there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks from the Louisiana area that are highly, highly ranked. Peyton Houston appears to be OU's top choice. And like I said, and I think they probably have, come back into the lead there. But they also had on campus Malachi Ziegler, who's also from Louisiana. He's a slightly bigger kid than Houston, I think, but he's a top 50 player in the nation, but the number 3 quarterback from Louisiana. So OU, I think, is probably going to have to ask Ziegler to come to summer camp so they can watch him throw. They may offer him before that, depending upon how things are going with Peyton Houston. Wouldn't shock me if Texas and OU split Peyton Houston and Malachi Ziegler. One goes to Norman, one goes to Austin, with LSU going all out for Elijah Haven, who right now is the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 player in the nation for 2027. So, according to 247, On3 has different opinions. So does Rivals, but we'll go with 247 on this episode. So, you did a good job recruiting him. It looks like they're definitely in the running there. I wouldn't surprise me if he does not get an offer relatively soon with OU. And then OU will then push him to come to camp, and then obviously OU's you can't with the quarterback position. Unlike this weird thing going on with O'Neal and Bentley, this is a position where OU would usually only take one guy and would like to get that locked down this summer so that the quarterback can start being the captain of the class and start working on the class. So that's where things are for 2027. Things for 2026 still very muddled in this weird recruit 2 elite quarterbacks mission that OU appears to be on. And some other 2027 recruiting news coming out of the Future Freaks Week. On the Monday after the visit weekend, Zane Rowe, the defensive end from Denton Guyer, who decommitted from OU, was back on campus watching spring practice at OU. Social media posts with him and Miguel Chavis. So it looks like he is very much still considering OU. And it has been noted on several podcasts, and folks have seen Zane lately, that he's now 6'5", 250. So he's very much filling out that elite frame that he had with that elite athleticism that, I thought he was a 5-star defensive end based upon his freshman film. His sophomore film's really, really good too. So, and now he's adding some weight to his frame. So it would not shock me if Zane Rowe doesn't end up as a top 30 type player in the nation. Then in some more positive tight end news, you had another 2027 tight end visit for the Future Freaks weekend. That's Jeremy Cooper. He's 6'4", 230, very talented wide receiver. He's from Texas. Let me double check. I believe he's from Duncanville. But OU's been offering Duncanville and a lot of North Crawley kids as well. So, so it's a big addition. You've got him. I know you obviously offered last week the Hawk kid from Choctaw. So some hints of Joe John Finley making some progress at tight end recruiting. At least the kids are visiting. They're being on campus, so that's a good movement for OU. It's definitely a positive sign for the Sooners at tight end recruiting. that offers are being made and kids are visiting. And it looks like OU's doing a good job recruiting them. So OU has established some official visits from some national kids for 2026. I just want to double check here, make sure I haven't missed anybody. All right. So we have on 6/6, we're adding Brian Harris, the big defensive end from Florida, who just visited, defensive tackle, who just visited for Future Freaks. OU's made a serious move there. Jabari Brady, the big wide receiver who visited in January and who has played 7-on-7 football with Jaden O'Neal, has also set an official visit. Looks like Missouri, maybe a big competitor there. At linebacker, Keenan Harris from St. Louis, top 200 player in the nation, 6'1", 220, safety linebacker, kind of hybrid kind of player, probably end up playing will for OU. Big, athletic, just a good addition. The linebacker recruiting room is really getting better and better. You can tell that Dreiling's doing a good job at linebacker recruiting. It's better than it's been, certainly better than it was last year. Then we have the last one is Donovan Webb, a safety from Texas who OU's very interested in. 4-star guy, top 250 kind of player. He's now committed for the barbecue weekend. And, OU's fighting in-state players and probably LSU as well, but he's a really talented safety, good coverage skills, could almost maybe play corner. So he's on the safety board. So Brandon Hall doing, again, a great job recruiting. He's got, Caden Hall from Florida, who's a top 100 type player. And then you've got OU's just doing a good job getting safeties. And then you've got Celesi Moa from Utah, who is borderline 5-star, depending on what service you're looking at. He's also a possible option at safety. OU's doing a great job recruiting him. So Brandon Hall, again, poised to push to have maybe his best safety class ever, depending on how many players he signs and who he gets. But it's definitely he's doing exactly what he needs to do to have lots of options at safety and some high-level guys and high-level guys committed to visiting. OU made 2 new offers for 2026, one coming out of Future Freaks and then one kind of coming out of nowhere. The first one was Jaden Petit. I mentioned him on the podcast, and OU went ahead and made an offer to him. He's 6'4", 200 pounds, wide receiver from Florida, composite 4-star, top 200 type player, big, physical, athletic. Can never have enough of those guys. So he's got an offer, and I imagine we could see an official visit being set up at some point relatively soon. Although, with Jabari Brady and now John Miles, you have 2 big kids, along with Jordan Clay from San Antonio. He's a big wide receiver as well. So Emmett Jones keeping lots of options going at wide receiver. And the final news of the week, OU has made some offers for 2027. 3 players. The biggest name is Dakota Garant, a 5-star, top 130 type player from Michigan. He has like 30 offers. He's 6'2", 185 pounds. He looks great on film. I don't know if OU has any chance of really closing on that, but nonetheless, they made the offer. Then 2 more offers that seem a little more grounded. OU offered James Trey Robinson from Allen, Texas. He's a 6'1", 185-pound safety. Really good safety film, physical, good in coverage. And then OU offered Jonathan Moore, who's an athlete safety from the St. Louis area. Brandon Hall made the offer, so it's probably at safety, although he does play some athletic quarterback. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, looks really good at safety. Again, athletic, physical, but good coverage skills. Basically, what Brandon Hall, continues to recruit. So that's the 2027. That's the last offers made for 2027. OU is on spring break this week, so there's no spring practice. I don't know if the OU coaches are going to take advantage of this and take a little break. So it might be a little slow recruiting news this week. We'll do an update on Friday, regardless, in some way, shape, or by Friday or Saturday, in some way, shape, or form. Maybe, we'll have more news on Jonathan Hatton and Caden Jones. Maybe we'll have more news on the quarterback situation. I don't know, but or some other things. Recruiting's heating up. OU's got enough offers out there, and kids are starting to see enough campuses that you could see some triggers being pulled for OU for some kids, especially you got a good group of interior O linemen, wide receivers kind of bunched up together. There's a lot, OU's made some strides with some defensive linemen. So I think there's some areas where you could see some movement. Also, I think OU over, not this week, but I think after spring break, OU will have more kids on campus visiting. I think we may have a Jake Krull visit coming up. Luke Waffle, the big defensive end from New Jersey, should be on campus at some point in the next week or two. And other guys will, nationally will stroll in, folks who couldn't make it to Future Freaks. So that's what I anticipate happening over the next 10 days. Again, like I said, I don't see too many commitments other than Hatton maybe on the timeline, but we are getting to the point where some kids have seen OU multiple times, and they've had a chance in January, February, and March to go other places, see other campuses, and maybe be able to feel like they're ready to make a commitment to OU and not take any official visits anywhere else. So we'll see how that shakes out. But that's the recruiting news for now. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to leave a rating if you're doing the audio version. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the Sooners 360 YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. And finally, please visit patreon.com/Sooners360817 to subscribe for more recruiting content. That Patreon site directly supports this podcast and keeps this podcast free. So please consider giving us a trial. I'm posting all of the recruiting content you hear on this podcast days before, earlier, and some stuff that I'm just not going to talk about on the podcast. So thanks, everyone, and we'll be back later this week with an update of some kind.